President Biden is hosting his South Korean counterpart at the White House today.
The two leaders met in a show of solidarity to announce a joint nuclear partnership. The president and first lady held an official greeting ceremony for South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol and his wife this morning. At a joint press conference this afternoon, they announced the nuclear strategy known as the Washington Declaration and their efforts to dissuade any acts of aggression that threaten the Korean Peninsula and the Indo-Pacific region as a whole.
The Republic of Korea and the United States are working together, including through our trilateral cooperation with Japan, to ensure the future of the Indo-Pacific is free, is open, prosperous, and secure.
Let's bring in CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe, who is there, as we all see, enjoying the kind of nice weather, but also listening closely to what these world leaders are saying. Ed, what's notable is President Yoon earlier this year did float the possibility of South Korea developing its own nukes if the threat from the north worsened. So how do we get to this announcement today for South Korea saying, never mind, we're going to rely on the United States?
Because the United States committed to at least having nuclear-armed submarines dock and port, visit, depending on the vernacular that officials use, in South Korea for the first time, essentially since the 1980s, in a far more dramatic and apparent attempt to counter the potential nuclear threats from North Korea. So that's part of today's announcement, at least. This visit has been scheduled for quite some time, seen as a key relationship that has to be fostered and has to be respected. And so the South Korean leader today is getting the full trappings of a state visit. There was the formal arrival earlier. There's a state dinner later tonight where hundreds of guests are expected to gather. And there is that agreement that was announced that the U.S. military at least will make visits. The U.S. Navy will park its submarines there in South Korean ports to try to deter the North Koreans. Now, they've responded saying that's a dramatic escalation. They're not happy about it. And we'll see whether there's any other response from Russia or other countries in the region to this. But it is in part designed to stem or perhaps dissuade South Korea from developing its own nuclear capabilities, because the last thing the world wants, at least in the views of the United States, is another nuclear power.
So, Ed, you mentioned North Korea had already sort of responded to this. President Biden said he's going to continue to seek diplomatic breakthroughs with North Korea. What does that say about what does today's declaration say about where these talks are? Is diplomacy still alive?
Well, you know, U.S. officials would say they're trying, but there hasn't been any real meaningful diplomatic engagement between the two countries that we're aware of, that administration officials have signaled at all over the course of the Biden administration. So by doing what they're doing today, at least, it's a signal to North Korea of how seriously the United States takes the threat. But at the same time, they're, of course, expressing a willingness to keep talking.
Ed, the president was asked here in the last few minutes about recent polling, including CBS News polling, showing American voters are concerned about his age. He is 80. He will be running. He's running for president again, making him the oldest sitting president. And Democrats who are reluctant to support him. How did Mr. Biden respond?
Well, it was notable. These are his first extended comments on the issue of age since the latest round of polling has suggested there is great concern, not only among Americans overall, but notably among Democrats, that perhaps because of his age, he would be 82 by Election Day 2024, that he perhaps is just too old to do this. The answer that he gave, or the answer he's given in the past, is watch me, meaning see me do the job, and if you got any concern, you know, you can vote otherwise. But persistently, and most recently, age now is the big reason why there is reluctance, or at least morose acceptance of the fact that he's going to do this. And so hearing him today suggests that, first of all, he's mired in the 40s. Look, it depends on the poll. 46% may be a little generous. We have seen polling that suggests it's closer to 41, high 30s, and on certain issues it can be lower than that. But what he's also saying is, I've got some time, and he's not wrong about that. There's still more than a year to go. He has the Democratic field at least all to himself, and so he'll allow Republicans to fight it out in a primary on their side, while he can continue making the argument to people that he should be reelected. One other thing about this reelection, He is doing something literally today that many other incumbent presidents seeking re-election have done. They're adopting what's called the Rose Garden strategy. In essence, just keep doing the job and do it in a higher profile way. Show people that you're doing the job, and hopefully they'll like that. Well, here we are literally in the Rose Garden today. He's hosting a world leader, and he's making use of that strategy. And we've been told by campaign aides, by White House officials, that at least in the coming weeks, that's the plan. To, in essence, keep their heads down, have him keep doing the day job, focus on raising money, and eventually get out there and campaign. But if he can keep doing the job the way he's been doing it, while Republicans are squabbling amongst themselves, while he's, as he mentioned there at the end, fighting with the House Speaker over whether or not to raise the debt limit, they believe his poll numbers will improve as Americans look at the contrast and say they like the president, what he's been up to.
Ed O'Keefe, thank you very much.